Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar that's Health and Safety at Work, an Introduction to Food Safety. And before we get going, and as usual, we would like to just introduce ourselves. So today's webinar will be run by Dom Greenwood, who is our Senior Health and Safety and Environmental Management Consultant. He's also a National Safety Trainer and has qualifications in fire safety, health safety, food safety, first aid, safeguarding and mental health. I'm Victoria Templeton and I'll be supporting Dom with the webinar, and Drew Naggis, my colleague, will also be supporting in the background should there be any technical questions. Because we've got so many of you that have joined us today, we've placed you all on mute. However, we do want to ask you questions. And so we'll be taking your questions at the end, and here's a quick guide as to what that would look like in terms of how you would submit your question. You should have this panel on your screen, and this is where you submit your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to now hand over to Dom, and we'll get going with the webinar. So here you go, Dom, I'm just handing over to you.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Can you see my screen, Victoria?
Yeah.
Has that moved?
Yes.
Lovely. Well, welcome everybody to this our webinar today, and we're going to talk about an introduction to food safety. There's a short agenda there that I'm just going to run through with you. We're going to look at why food safety and food hygiene is important, the laws and legislations around food safety, what the various food allergens are, which leads us into good food safety procedures, and then just thinking about how that can have an impact on you as an individual, whether it be you're a manager or a food handler, and obviously the business that you work in. What statutory compliance is around food safety in the workplace, what you can do, and then maybe how we can help you as a business, whether it be through training or policies, procedures, or future webinars. And then at the end, like usual, there'll be some useful links and then information on the next webinar and various training courses. So just thinking about what is food safety and why is it important, there's just an overarching definition there that food safety refers to handling, preparing, storing and serving of food in a way to best reduce the risk of individuals becoming sick from foodborne illnesses. I think we'd all agree with that. But there is a difference, and I do hear this quite regularly and get asked about this quite regularly, about the difference between food safety and food hygiene, and there's obviously a big overlap, and both subjects kind of do bleed into one. But food safety is more about, and I'll actually put it up there, covers all the aspects of ensuring that food is safe to eat by a person, and it can be from how that's delivered to the establishment, obviously how it's prepared, how it's delivered, how it's served. With food hygiene, thinking more about the specific concerns around illnesses, bacterial contaminants, chemicals, physical hazards, and everything in between. But as you'll appreciate, they do both mix together very well. But it's really important to think about how the food actually gets to the establishment. Is it delivered in a safe manner? Is it chilled in a safe manner? Is it kind of unpacked in a safe manner? Is PPE being worn? Then obviously, is it being prepared and served in the correct manner as well? So food issues you need to know all about it. There was a survey by the FSA, the Food Standards Agency, back in November. So we were in COVID times then. We still are now, to be honest, but it was very different back then. But interestingly, nearly half of the respondents had a concern about food safety in the UK with restaurants, pubs, cafes and takeaways. And around 40% were concerned about food safety in shops and supermarkets. And as you'll all be aware, there's more and more shops and supermarkets that are now serving food, whether it be pre-packed or whether it be served as well. Garages being a big one now, with various different outlets in concessions in garages. More than 80% of people thought they'd had food poisoning from undercooked chicken, turkey, followed by 57% shellfish, and various takeaways at 50%. So that's it's a high proportion of people. Other suspected sources include eggs and washed vegetables and salad, cooked sliced meats, and pre-prepared sandwiches, with almost 90% being reported for bread and frozen vegetables as a possible source. So we've got some big numbers on there. Researchers have estimated there's around 180 deaths per year in the United Kingdom from foodborne diseases, and with a varying amount of different pathogens. with the FSA estimating that around 2.5 million cases of foodborne illnesses occur every year. These are big numbers, and if we liken this to health and safety, they're very, very similar. The FSA gave out 136,359 enforcement actions, in which in 2020, which included 132 written warnings, 2402 hygiene improvement notices, 4278 enforcement actions, 290 hygiene prohibition orders, and 198 prosecutions. 92% of offenders received a fine, with the average fine being around £7,500, which doesn't seem like a lot, but with the way things are at the moment, with inflation going up and food prices going up, to be hit with a £7,500 fine for a small cafe, restaurant, bar, brasserie, whatever it might be, would be a lot of money. So you know, just to give it a little bit of context, there are issues and concerns around food safety. So poor food hygiene can cause, as you'll appreciate, food poisoning. I think we've probably all had that before. I know I have. But more than that, it gives the establishment a poor reputation. It can lead to further waste because batches of food have to be thrown away. If things aren't frozen properly, they have to be thrown away. Obviously, complaints from customers. That could then lead to staff being away from the workplace. And if a staff member or a food handler or a food server has had diarrhoea and sickness, they have to legally be away from the establishment for 2 clear days. That then causes a lack of income, and also their shifts have to be covered. And there could be compensation claims as well if it can be proved that the food was served, handled, stored, chilled in the wrong manner. So there are definitely knock-on effects with poor food hygiene. With the benefits of good food hygiene being better staff turnover, you're going to get a good reputation in the area, and you'll have all seen the scores on the door stickers from the Food Standards Agency, the 1 out of 5, the 3 out of 5, the 4 out of 5, whatever it might be. We're going to come on to that, which leads us on to positive PR from food safety schemes, and then better income by more customers using the service, but more importantly, telling everybody else had a great meal, was really clean, the toilets really clean, the kitchen was really clean, the staff had gloves on and masks on. You really want to go there. So what can happen to you in your workplace? And this is just some stuff that I'm lucky enough to be working with an environmental health officer, and she is actually a Food Standards Agency officer, and she's more than happy to give me some pictures. But these are real pictures. That actually is a bench where food's served, but that is actually a commercial tin opener with the handle there, and obviously you can quite clearly see the rust and dirt and debris on there. And that was actually at a place called Figaro's Pizzas in Dudley, the Black Country, East Midlands, and that particular pizza outlet had 18 hygiene offences at that particular time. Dirty walls and floors, failure to clean away food, evidence of equipment not being cleaned. Inspectors found insufficient lighting, handrails on the stairs, and a dirty stained toilet. Ordered to pay nearly £27,000. That's a lot of money, but the reputation that has given that pizza parlour is massive. It's all over the internet, the HSE, whatever it might be. And there's a few more. Again, you can see some bugs and bits and pieces on that one, and that was the Babylon Inn in Croydon. 36 hygiene breaches and massive fine there, £93,000. So you can see the impact that's had on that particular establishment. A bigger one here, £175,000 fine after an oven exploded in an Indian supermarket and linked to a restaurant with out-of-date meat and rat droppings found there as well. Aside from the £175,000, each director had to pay a further £4,000 in costs, with 38 months in prison for the various offences, which was suspended for 2 years. But that was a massive issue in that particular area. Grimsby Pub Company fined £5,000. Again, you can quite clearly see the issues there in the bathrooms. Unfortunately, dirt and grime and grit and debris does become evident behind tiles, and so it's not cleaned properly in floor tiles and floor coverings. That then can make its way into the kitchen areas. And then an owner of a Norwich restaurant, House of Tiago, was fined £19,500 for food hygiene breaches there. One of the ones was, obviously you can see dirty fingernails. That was a picture that the FSA officer took. And again, you've got, for some reason, that the hand wash basin in the kitchen is actually not usable. They're using it to store glasses in, but also they've got it covered over. And again, there was near £20,000 fine there. Seeking to live in hotels, and again, you can see quite clearly the dirt and debris and grease on there, £60,000 fine. So these are everywhere, and there's just an array of pictures there that I'm happy to display. These are real. These are from, as I say, my friend's a FSA inspector, and when putting this together, she was happy to show some of our most recent cases. So you know the level of compliance and the level of detail between the very good and the very bad is really varied. So it's absolutely worth going back to your establishments to see, you know, where would you be should they come in and see you today, behind cabinets and in storerooms, around pipe works and plugs and switches and things like that. So thinking about cleaning regimes. This is a great poster, food hygiene and bacteria. Bacteria are the most common cause of food poisoning. I think we would all know that. They love the warmth, moisture, food, and obviously warm conditions. It gives them time to breed. So if you are in a management or supervisory role, you know, getting these kind of posters and putting them in your staff areas or in your back of house or kitchen areas would be really good, because it gives you ideas on good hygiene, food practices, PPE, and then obviously the storage and frozen food procedures as well. So why do we manage food safety? Well, it is the law. We don't have a choice. It's part of the Food Safety Act. We're going to come on to that. But employers have got a moral and ethical reason to do so. Very similar to the Fire Safety Order and the Health and Safety at Work Act. You've got consumers coming into your establishments eating food. You could have residents that are there if it's a care home or maybe a hotel. You could equally have staff working there as well. So you've got a moral and ethical duty to keep them safe from food poisoning. As we've already touched on, it improves reputation in your particular sector. It improves reputation locally. People talk. It's the first thing people talk about. And I can vividly remember my parents talking about a really bad meal they had at a particular restaurant when my father was very ill, and they still talked about it recently. And that restaurant's probably changed hands 10 times. It was 30 years ago, but they still talk about how ill he was and they would never go back there. So that has stuck with them, even though it's changed hands that many times. People don't forget. Obviously, it minimises risks to people, improves people's productivity. It's going to get you more business. And it could be that your insurance company might start to talk about how many food poisoning cases have you had, how many accidents have you had, whatever it might be. So there could be a condition of the insurance, which then leads on to different financial conditions because you might have to start paying more in your premiums. So the consequences of poor food hygiene can be anything from upsetting and inconvenience to causing serious illness or death. And you know, don't be surprised that really bad food poisoning can be very bad for the person. So by law, you must provide food and drink that is safe and wholesome. This means that ensuring every aspect of food handling is hygienic and that food risks are well managed. Which kind of brings us on to the legislation. So the Food Safety Act 1990 provides the framework to food hygiene and food safety in the UK or England, Scotland and Wales. Obviously Northern Ireland is slightly different. It establishes the responsibilities for food businesses to ensure the health and safety of customers is maintained. So therefore, knowing about the Food Safety Act is quite important. The overarching part of the Act is that any business which is involved with food, whether it's preparing it, labelling it, transporting it, storing it or selling it, must follow the Food Safety Act carefully. Obviously, it puts a duty on the people that own the business. It's very similar to the Health and Safety Act and the Fire Safety Order, in that the owner of the business would be classed as the responsible person. However, duties would also fall to food handlers, cleaners, to make sure they're doing things in terms of the customer's best interests. And it means that nothing can be taken away from the food that's important to the food, and nothing can be added to the food that will then give the person potential illnesses. So duties on staff in food roles would be people that are doing food handling. It would also include the premises and equipment, identifying and managing food hazards, informing, instructing and training of food handlers. So anybody who handles food has a legal duty to work hygienically, follow the procedures, wear appropriate clothing, report illnesses immediately, and it's very, very important to do so, and work as you've been trained. So if it says to cook something at 300 degrees, that's what it needs to be cooked at. It's when we start taking shortcuts because we're under pressure to get dishes out that the food safety procedures could be compromised. So a summary of the Food Safety Act would be: if your business deals in food, it must make sure food is safe to eat. Make sure you don't add, remove or treat food in a way that makes it harmful to eat. Make sure the food is the same quality that you say it is. So if you're describing something on a menu or on a picture, It needs to be exactly the same as the way you've described it. So make sure you don't mislead people by the way food is labelled, advertised or marketed. Keep records on where you get the food from and show this information on demand, because it could be that if there was a serious bout of food poisoning, the FSA and the EHO might want to come and find what batch of meat that was, where did it come from, how it was slaughtered, how it was reared, whatever it might be. And this is how we find out about things like mad cow disease, for instance, and avian flu, which is around at the moment. You must withdraw unsafe food and complete an incident report form. And if you haven't got an incident report form, you need to think about where you're going to get one of those from. We can help you with that, but make sure you've got the correct forms to fill in as well. Tell people why food has been withdrawn, for example, by using a leaflet poster, and displayed your food hygiene rating. So if you've done the FSA scores on the doors, you need to display the picture. And obviously it'd be disappointing if you got 1, 2 or 3 out of 5, but you can reapply for that in a 3-month period. So you do need to display your rating. So the following bullet points act as food safety summary. I think we just largely covered that with the regulator being the Food Safety Standards Agency, and their website would be food.gov.uk. So make yourself aware of that. Established in the year 2000, they are now the regulator. It was taken away from the Health and Safety Executive, and the power was given back to the environmental health officers to run the Food Standards Agency. And they've now got the power to come in and check establishments, very, very similar to a health and safety inspector. So a food safety inspector, more commonly known as the EHO, have got these various powers. They can enter the premises under section 32-33. They can take control of your premises under those sections. They can take samples of food. They can serve a hygiene improvement notice, which would be very similar to a health and safety notice, where they would say, we're going to come back in 28 days and you need to make sure these areas are clean and show us your cleaning regime and protocols. But they could also decide to try and prosecute with a prohibition order, or they could serve an emergency hygiene prohibition order. And these are the ones that you see sometimes on the TV programs, where they go into takeaways or whatever it might be, hotels, and they close them down with immediate effect because the hygiene issues are that bad. That would then have to go to a magistrate's court, and that could then lead into a prosecution with quite a number of different layers then having to be fulfilled for the business to then reopen. So if we're going down that route, then there's something seriously wrong with the business. So certainly if you get a hygiene improvement notice, that is a kind of a warning. So dress rehearsal, get your back of house in order, get your cleaning in order, get the protocols in order. If they come back and it's worse, you could then be served with something a little bit worse. So there's some explanations there. A hygiene improvement notice example could be if there's an issue with cleanliness of a food preparation area. The notice will tell you what to do, give you the outline of the issues, and it would but it wouldn't stop you from trading and carrying on. However, the FSA could then seek a prosecution or conviction should it then not be put in place. If you're served with a hygiene emergency prohibition notice, it means that the environmental health officer intends to apply for a court order to stop you trading immediately. For many businesses, this will mean that your establishment would have to close, as you'll appreciate. There is a food law code of practice, which you can obviously download, and it's all available on the food.gov.uk website. So absolutely have a look at that. What can you do with due diligence? Make sure you're doing what you're saying you're doing. This is the principal defence available to all food businesses if legal action is taken. The business must prove they've taken every reasonable precaution to ensure the safety of the food. So have you got systems or controls, training of staff, implementation of cleaning, inspections of deliveries, pest control, record keeping and written records? So the very, very basic stuff there. Some of the bigger companies now have digital systems, not always necessary. Check sheets and records and procedures and risk assessments on paper is just as good. It's more about do the food handlers and do the delivery people and do the cleaners know what you're saying you're going to do. Really, somebody needs to be responsible for that, and we're going to come on to who that role would be. It's absolutely worth trying to get a copy of the Food Law Code of Practice, because it gives you all the instructions that the local authorities must consider when enforcing the law. So if you're aware of that when they come in, you know what they can and can't say, because they have to follow and implement the relevant sections of the code. So it's absolutely worth downloading a copy of that. Again, it's available on the food.gov.uk website for free. So it brings us on to what we in the industry call the scores on the doors, and you'll have seen these around from 0 to 5. people do take notice of these now. There's a couple of takeaways in my town that previously were scored 2 or 3, and it was a bit of a talking point, and they're now up to 5, I'm happy to say. But people do look at these, and you can see the list there. Obviously 0 would be urgent improvement is required. 5 is hygiene standards are very good, and it goes back from good to generally satisfactory, improvements necessary, and major improvements necessary. Have a look at these, see what your local takeaways, cafes, bars, hotels are like in your area. More importantly, see if you can find the sticker, because if it's very difficult to find, it might be that they've got a low score. If it's front and center on the main doors, they're probably happy to tell you they've got a 4 or 5. But this is now the tool that the Food Standards Agency obviously use and send round. The ratings are a snapshot of the standards of food hygiene at the time of the inspection. It's very much like any kind of inspection. It could be good one day and bad the next, but it gives us a basic understanding of where the establishment is at that period of time. And it includes handling of food, food storage, food preparation, the cleaning of the whole facility. So it will include the toilets, the communal areas, and the food prep areas, and where people are sitting and eating, and how the food safety is actually managed. So who's actually taking control of food safety, what training's been done, is being done, are there checks in place, are there audits and inspections in place. The food hygiene rating does not provide information on things like the quality of the food, customer service, the skills of the chefs, presentation, and things like that. That's more of a brand standard type of a rating scheme that you could apply for. So it's very much more about the health and safety of the food. Ratings are typically given to places such as where food supplied, sold, or consumed. So you'll have seen these in restaurants, pubs, and cafes, takeaway vans, food vans and stalls, canteens, and hotels, supermarkets, schools, and hospitals. And the food safety officer from the local authority inspects the business to check that it follows the food hygiene law. So it's their job now to go around and actively inspect where the ratings are given. There are a couple of exemptions, as you can see there. Businesses that are constituted as low risk, and a couple of examples there are newsagents, chemists, or visitor centres that are selling pre-wrapped food that doesn't need to have any kind of storage, refrigeration, or handling. And places at home where you've got childminders coming in, maybe carers coming in that are offering services at home. So they are at this point in time exempt. Whether that will change with the amount of people that now work from home, because I'm aware that obviously people that make wedding cakes from home, for instance, got a friend that does that, has now had to apply for the food hygiene rating in her own kitchen. So this may change over the next few years. So it's worth absolutely keeping an eye on that. So just moving on to staff compliance and training, it's important to have clear policies which set out the intent you have towards good food hygiene. It's massively important to have a food safety policy, but also a food safety policy statement. And the clients I work with, I encourage them to have that in place in the reception area or the lobby area, or wherever it might be, sat alongside the health and safety policy statement and the fire safety policy statement and any of the policy statements that you've got, so that customers can read your intent and how you propose to manage food safety in the workplace. So I think that's really, really important. So it brings us on to what is a competent person, and this terminology, competent person, appears in a number of the safety legislations that we work with: the Fire Safety Order, the Health and Safety Work Act, and now the Food Safety Act, because it's putting the onus on the business owner to appoint people that can deliver the act for the workplace. With that being, a competent person is someone who has sufficient training, qualifications, knowledge and experience and other qualities that allow them to assist the responsible person, brackets the owner, with health and safety matters. The level of competence required depends on the complexity of the situation and the organisation. It might be that if a regulator was to come round, they might want to see the competence. Show us your certificate, show us your training, show us what CPD, continued professional development, that you've done. And the acronym we tend to use is SCATE. So skills, knowledge, attitude, training, and experience. So when you're thinking about who the best person to be the competent person is, think about the acronym SCATE. Have they got the right skills? Have they got the knowledge in the area of whatever particular food it is that you're serving? Have they got a good attitude towards food safety, or are they more of like, well, that'll be okay, don't worry about that, I'll do it Tuesday, no, don't worry? Are they sufficiently trained, and have they got the experience? So SCATE's a really good acronym to think about when you're considering who the competent person would be. That competent person would then think about, implementing or managing a food safety management system, which is for short FSMS. And it's used really to control the processes for managing food safety, very much in the same way that a health and safety management system would be. So a food safety management system is not only a legal requirement, but a helpful tool to ensure safe practices are followed within your business. Taking down fridge temperatures, for instance, logging when cleaning of ovens it happens. And as I said earlier, a number of the big players now, the franchises and the big restaurants, have digital systems, which is great. But you can equally achieve this by your paper-based folder system, which could have temperature checks, it could have toilet checks, it could have cleaning, it could have training, just to know a few bits there. So the law states that all food businesses must have some kind of food management system. It doesn't state which one you need. These procedures should be based around the internationally accepted model of HACCP, which I'm hoping you've heard of, which is another acronym and stands for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points. And if you run a really good HACCP system, the chance of food poisoning and foodborne illnesses is almost negated because it can't get through. So everyone in the food business needs to know about it. You know, this is our food management system. This is what we're going to do. These are the checks we're going to do. This is the training we're going to do. So the advantages of adopting that would be it covers all food processing, identifies potential hazards early enough so that intervention can happen, highlights unsafe parts of the business, record keeping's on there, resourcing's on there, gives a greater confidence in food safety, provides a common approach that's widely understood and accepted. The other thing is if you then move to a different restaurant, cafe, bar, and they're running some sort of food management system or HACCP, you'll then know how it runs, so you can quickly adopt it when you start in a new role. HACCP is a management system in which food safety is addressed through the analysis of biological, chemical, physical hazards from raw material production, procurement, and handling. It's kind of cradle to grave of food safety, from where it's come from until you kind of get it into your mouth, really, or it arrives at your table, and the final consumption of the finished product. If you think about hazards, that's anything with the potential to cause harm. So don't just think of it being bacterial. It could be physical. It could be something in there that hasn't been taken out. It could be that there's been work happening in the restaurant that day, and unfortunately, a workman hasn't taken a drill bit and it's slipped into something, and that's then, because it's got grease and dirt and debris on it, that could then contaminate the food. It could be chemical, it could be fly spray, it could be floor cleaner, it could be, again, someone doing some work on the lights above and some spray gets into the the food. Allergenic could be nut traces, and we know now just how many issues there are with allergenic and things like that. And we'll be aware of the young girl that died on the plane from eating the pret-a-manger sesame seed bun, when obviously food packaging has massively changed. But anaphylaxis is a big one. So, you know, have we got strict protocols in our kitchens on what allergens we'll allow in there? A would be for analysis of the risk, measuring the likelihood that a hazard could happen. So things like an undercooked chicken being served at a large wedding reception is likely to make a lot of people ill with salmonella would be a high risk. Finding a slug in a cheeseburger with only one person who's going to take a bite out of that is a low risk. That said, for that one person, they probably wouldn't be very happy. But thinking about storage, where raw meat's kept, could raw meat on a high shelf then drip onto things on a lower shelf? So let's swap that round and put the raw meat at the bottom so they can't drip onto other products. But even better than that, let's cover it properly. Let's get the right coverings, the right dishes with the proper lids, and check in as well. Control measures. So what precautions have we taken to reduce that chance of hazards happening? That could be from checking the storage procedures, checking the right fridge temperatures, covering food from physical contamination, cleaning, and using the correct cutting boards, as you'll appreciate. So there's a number of different control measures you can implement, very much like in the health and safety world, whether they're identified through risk assessments or food assessments. They're largely the same thing, but think about what control measures you can put in place. The other C would be critical control points, which would be any step along the way where a hazard could be prevented and you can step in and eliminate that particular hazard. So an example of a CCP would be thermal processing, chilling, testing ingredients for chemical residues, product formulation controls, and testing the products for metal contaminants. So at any point, can you test the product and intervene to make sure that that control point is working? And there's an overview there of what we call the HACCP plan. And it could be that you could go back now to your kitchen or your wherever you're working and ask, have we got a HACCP plan? If you haven't, then we can absolutely help you put that together. If you have, that is kind of what it should be look like. So conducting a hazard analysis, that could be in the form of an inspection or an audit, determining what the critical control points actually are, where the limits would be and how long things are allowed to be out of a fridge or uncovered, developing monitoring procedures, putting together an action plan, keeping the correct records, and then verify that it's actually being done. So just because it's in place on paper doesn't mean to say that it's actually being followed or is mutually understood by everybody. So as a manager or supervisor, it'd be great to go back in once a week and kind of check the check sheet to see that the HACCP plan is being followed properly. So you're going to check that all the critical control points are where they need to be. Moving on, allergens. And we did touch on this a few minutes ago with anaphylaxis, and obviously we're more and more aware of allergens and anaphylaxis since the unfortunate incident with the young girl. But also, I think we're living in a society now where more and more people are becoming allergic to different things, whether it be peanuts or shellfish or various other things. So certain foods can produce life-threatening reactions in some people, and these allergens can cause, as I've just said, something called anaphylaxis, with symptoms being, but not include, all including breathing difficulties, swelling of the mouth, eyes and throat, collapsing unconscious, and cardiac arrest. It absolutely has a bearing on the person's heart, changes their breathing, can make their throat swell up, and can cause a massive reaction, which can basically put the person into cardiac arrest. By law, all food businesses must clearly provide and produce and display the 14 major food allergens on any pre-packed and loose food. Ingredients should be displayed in bold print, and food businesses must display the food allergen poster. So if you look on the left there, you can quite clearly see at the bottom the ingredients. That's an example of food packaging as you've seen. And the two posters above would be, please ask a member of staff about ingredients in your meal. And then there's a different post there about food allergies, ask before you eat. Businesses will no longer be able to claim they didn't know about it, and they could obviously then be prosecuted. So it's absolutely worth thinking about in your establishment and also wherever you go to eat, to see if they've got the food allergy signs on the menus, on the walls, or if it's pre-packed, they've got the ingredients list. With a poster a bit like that, it doesn't have to be like that. My local Chinese takeaway's got one that looks very much like that, but I've got another restaurant where I live they've done their own. As long as the 14 allergen groups are on there, that's absolutely fine. So that's anything from celery, crustaceans, fish, milk, mustard, peanuts, soya, cereals containing gluten, eggs, lupin, mollusks, nuts, sesame seeds, as we know about, and then various different sulfur dioxides. So at the moment, there's 14 major allergens. Please, if you're running a commercial kitchen, cafe, bar, go on the Food Standards Agency and download the poster. I think it's free. Or just go onto Google, type it in, and then you can just drop it down and print it out and put it on the wall. And my view is, if you've got a staff area, I would put that in the staff area as well, because they need to be aware of it also. So what would the consequences be of not managing food safety? And we've already talked about this at the beginning of the presentation, that there could be legal ramifications. You know, you could, as the responsible person or the competent person, get a fine and potentially a custodial sentence. You could also be under compensation. Somebody brings about a legal case against you. It could be just an out-of-court settlement, could be anywhere between £5,000 and £10,000, which would then have a massive implication on the business going forward. We've already mentioned about higher insurance premiums, but we know there's a correlation between productivity and profitability of a business that runs health and safety systems and food safety systems. Staff could then become unmotivated because the kitchens are dirty and the storerooms are dirty, and they know there's going to be issues. They don't want to come to work, and you could then start finding that staff are going to leave. Reputational damage is massive. As I said to you earlier, the restaurant that my parents went to 30 years ago, they still talk about, and I've never been back since. So that still lives long in their memory, and that can happen as well. Funding issues could also lead to accidents, poor staff turnover, and then obviously the big one, poor PR. And just think about the world we live in now. We live in a very digital and a very immediate society. Everything is on Instagram and Facebook. The amount of people's dinners that I see just when I'm going looking through things, which is great. But if it's a bad meal or they find something physical hazard or something, believe me, that will go on there as well. So just think about the society that we all live in now. So let's think about how we can make staff more aware of food safety. And I think being visual is a really big thing and a really good thing to do. And that's a picture of a notice board in a client that I'm working with. They've got the sort of the 5 steps to food safety, different pictures on there, how to cook it, store it. And I think that's great. Their competent person looks after that and changes posters around and draws staff attention to that. There's a number of posters you can get that include first aid, fire safety, electrical safety, and part of that series is kitchen hygiene and kitchen safety. So for a tenner, you could buy this poster, and they're quite big, and put this in your staff area. And there's other ones as well, a bit like these. Food and safety, cover all 4 bases to avoid foodborne illnesses, and food prep and storage. So if you've got the room to have an area, a food safety area, I think it'd be great to have this kind of stuff on there that you can draw new staff towards and say, you know, read the posters, and every now and again sort of do a little toolbox talk around. Let's talk about refrigeration today. Let's talk about storage today. Let's talk about pests today. Have you ever seen this? And how's the cleaning going? And just rallying everybody together. So what can you guys do to try and make yourself a bit more compliant? Well, you could absolutely appoint a competent person in food safety. We've kind of covered that. Develop a food safety policy and promote a positive culture. If you're a manager, supervisor, or a member of the senior team, then lead from the top. You know, if you're asking your staff to wear PPE, you know, I don't know, beard protectors and hair protectors and hair nets, and you walk in and you're not the same, I think that the message there is obviously going to be diluted for the staff. So make sure you're doing that as well. Involve all levels of staff with what decision making you're doing. If you're going to bring in a food safety management system, bring in the guys from the kitchen and the servers as well to get their opinion. Think about how your health and safety is managed. You know, what is your cleaning, your training, your PPE like? So food safety and health and safety sit very closely together and often interlock really well. Review your statutory compliance. When was the last time your cookers were serviced? When was the last time you did your PAT testing? When was the last time you changed the filters in your filters above your fryers? When was the last time you did all your fire safety checks as well? Make sure you've got any correct permits or tickets or certificates for your industry. Every industry is slightly different. Obviously, if you're running a commercial kitchen in the NHS, that'd be very different if you're running a little tea room in a village, you know, as part of the church, for instance. But so think about what your particular sector or industry is asking you to produce. Looking at risk assessments and tasks, training staff in safety measures. There's so much training available now. It can be online training where you do a video, take a tutorial, and get a certificate. It can be a webinar like today, or it could be a delegated course where you go off and do an accredited training program. So there's a number of different ways you can do training. Develop safe systems of work. Look at the culture in the organisation. Is everybody singing from the same hymn sheet? Have you got visions and values displayed so that everybody understands what you're going to be doing? Think about the emergency procedures. What would happen if you had an outbreak of a foodborne illness? What would happen if you put contaminated meat in with chicken and eggs in the fridge and salmonella came out? So just think about what would you do, and have you got a procedure and a policy to reflect that so that everybody knows what to do? Because guess what, it'll be when the manager's on holiday and no one knows what they're doing. If you've got it all written down, you can then react really well. Please do investigate accidents, incidents, and near misses. If something happens, let's find out why. Let's find out if the HACCP system's working and what you might need to do to stop it happening again. Look at equipment, chemicals, processes, and people, and see it as a positive thing. It looks like it's a lot of work to get this all in place, but once it's in place, it's just about managing it and making sure that everybody understands it. So how can we help you as a business? HR Solutions obviously is primarily an HR consultancy company, but we've got a health and safety arm as well, and we now undertake food safety work. So we can absolutely come and do a food safety audit for you. We can do health and safety audits, help you with your risk assessments, put together food safety awareness training. We also offer the level 2 fully accredited food safety training course. We can be your competent person for you, or we can train the competent person for you. and we can put together documents and checklists, pretty much what we've been talking about throughout the whole webinar, from fridge temp sheets to oven cleaning sheets to cleaning of the establishment sheets to food safety documents, HACCP systems, and everything in between. So that kind of brings me back to, I think, the end of the actual content. There are some further training dates to talk about, and the two that we're running over the next few months, and I appreciate they're a few months away, but it gives people a chance to book in. These are delegated courses for level 2 food safety held at Kettering Park Hotel and Sleep Hall Hotel in St Ives near Cambridge, 20th of September and the 13th of December. And anybody that's attended today's webinar then gets the discount that drops that to £99, which includes refreshments, lunch and parking, all the books and resources, the exam fee and the certificate. So please take that back to your managers. Should you wish to book onto that, please come back to us directly and we'll happily book you onto that. And as I say, include the discount with that as well. There are some further health and safety training courses coming up. We've got level 2 health and safety and level 2 fire safety in May and June, and we're holding those at our head office at HR Solutions in Kettering. We're doing safeguarding in June as well, first aid in July, and then mental health first aid in July as well. So we're quite busy with training over the next few months, which is great. We also do the ILM, Institute of Leadership Management Awards, level 3 and level 5. The next cohort of level 3 begins in September and on the 7th, and ILM 5 begins on the 8th. And again, please save your spot. Please come back to us. Tell people that we're running those courses, because we're really proud to be a partner with the ILM. There's various management training courses coming up as well: managing conflict at work, disciplinary and grievance, EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion, managing poor performers and holding difficult conversations. So there's loads of training going on, and these again, I believe, and Victoria might correct me, are these free, Victoria, or are these paid for? I can't remember.
No, these are paid for. So yeah, everything's all detailed on our main website.
Great.
And I believe they're virtual training courses for the people management ones.
Okay, great.
Lovely. So shall I?
Yeah, I'll hand back to you, Victoria, and you can finish off. And thanks for your time, everybody. Hope you've learnt some basic food safety awareness. And please do contact me if there's anything further I can go through with you over the next few days.
Brilliant, thank you. So you should all be able to see the screen. So as Dom's kindly gone through, there's the ILM training that we offer. So that runs alongside our management training. But yeah, coming back to the webinars, we have a program running all the way through till August actually. So our next webinar is around dismissals and what did P&O get wrong. We're also running one in June where we're working alongside Norden, and it's all going to be about boosting your finances. We've got a couple of health and safety webinars as well, so the prosecutions as well as directors' responsibilities. And because we've also seen some changes around immigration rules, then we're going to give you an update in July on the 14th in regards to that. So this brings me to the end of Dom's webinar. So if you do have any questions, then please do reach out to Dom and ourselves at HR Solutions on the details that are showing on the screen. And as well, after the webinar, we shall be sending a short survey to capture your feedback. So we would really be appreciated if you could complete this survey. It just enables us to constantly improve our webinar program for you. And that brings me to the end, and just to say thank you, Dom, for such an insightful and interesting webinar. Some of those images were absolutely shocking of the real life footage of what goes on. But thank you for all that information. It's really interesting. Thank you. And hopefully it's helped everybody there who's listening to our webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to close the webinar. So thank you, everybody, and hopefully see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.